Well, welcome to the Bread Chair. Today we have a very special guest here, Vasco from Unbabel, founder and CEO. We've known each other for many years. It's one of our portfolio companies. It used to be a portfolio company at Caixa. Now it's again a portfolio company at Indico. So welcome, Vasco.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan. And you're right. I mean, it's been 10 years. I think you were one of the first people to believe in Unbabel and to kind of invest. It's been, you've always been a big supporter of the Lisbon ecosystem in general and Unbabel.
Still a big believer. I know you're doing amazing stuff, and that's why we're here. We'd love to know your story. How did it all start?
Okay, well, AI was always a big part of my life. The idea of consciousness, sci-fi, love reading, love imagining new worlds. And then in hindsight, I can see how language was always a big part because my mother is not retired, but she was a professor of English linguistics. And so language and the idea of understanding consciousness through language ended up being the way that I was thinking about stuff. I think I started my first kind of foray into pseudo-entrepreneurial stuff was, I remember when I was 6, me and my sister used to sell door-to-door the Christmas cards.
That's very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, we'd make our own little cards.
In Portugal?
Oh yeah, in Lisbon.
That's very entrepreneurial, right?
We'd go knock and we'd spend a week making cards and make some money for Christmas gifts. And it's funny, I only thought of this as entrepreneurial recently. Before it was just something we did. I worked jobs during high school. I worked in a meat factory when I was 14.
A meat factory?
Yeah.
That I didn't know.
For a month, summer vacation, I was like, yeah. So I literally got to see how the sausage was made,
That's not a pretty sight.
Let's just say that ever since then, I've never ate lard again. But yes, I always like doing things, and I've always also liked building. I always consider myself a builder at heart, from making constructions of things or building different physical things was always something that drive me. And so I think when I combine this thing, I think if, I started coding when I was 6, 48K Spectrum, would spend weekends trying to, there would be the games that would publish in the newspaper, and you'd code the games, and then obviously you run it through a cassette, and then you find out there's a bug, and you have to go back.
Start again.
It was yeah, exactly. Exactly, right. And so I starting to code was important. Starting to feel the creative power of coding was something that really drove me. And so I knew fairly early on that computer science or computers was something that I was really keen on. Actually, I went to a military boarding school from 10 to 15. And and it was, in many ways, it was very formative years of my experience. And I feel a bit of a cognitive dissonance, I think, because on one hand, I gained a very strong aversion to discipline. On the other hand, I really like it. And so maybe I became unmanageable after that.
Maybe it's useful when you have to move from being a pirate to being the Navy, right?
Yes.
In this analogy?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I think so. I think even, for example, yesterday I gave we have the H2KO, so an RKO happening right now. It's wrapping up today in Lisbon. So we have 90 people in the revenue team here. And yesterday there was a big dinner at Stufa Fria. And I was giving this speech, and I've been thinking a lot about values on Unbabel and who we are and how do we want to behave. And I found that I've been kind of in a weird way, the values that you believe end up coming out in many ways. It's not just in your companies; they actually get expressed throughout your entire life as their real values. And one of the values that we're coming back to over and over, this idea of camaraderie, and camaraderie in the sense of taking care of the person that you're in a team with, right? Of your teammate, of obviously within brothers, within friends, the people that you're going through this hard journey or this difficult thing, you have their back, they have your back, right? And this is something that has been present in Unbabel from the beginning. But I think it took me a long time to accept camaraderie as a value, because it was a value at computers, right? And I think I had an aversion, but it is ingrained. It is something that I believe in.
But you've always had a very inclusive culture in Unbabel, and a very a spirit of cooperation and actually having people express themselves. And you go surfing once a week, or used to at least, right?
Yes.
And people were always very close, which is always, I mean, it's still a company, right? You still have to sort of perform at the highest level. And there's ups and downs, of course, and there's sometimes some people have to go.
But that's been a big part of Unbabel, and the way we're more and more define our culture. Do you remember the culture deck of Netflix? They came out with a culture deck a while ago, and they really cemented this idea of a professional sports team in a startup, right? And it became a bit of a fashion, like, yes, we're that. I always felt a bit hesitant because I don't think that's exactly us. I think it's very important to be high performant, but the idea that, like, it's just a job, that's it, you're just playing, and if you don't score, you're out of the team, period. It's not exactly us. I see us more as explorers. We're on this mission to get to a place that's never been before, to Antarctica, and if you're doing that, you need to do it with people that are really good at what they do, but you also need the cohesion of the team to be able to get there, right? It's not just a job. Recently there's this documentary of the 14 Peaks.
It's an amazing documentary,
right? And they're showing the difference between doing this as a team or doing this with people that are really good. They're not cohesive, right? That cohesion is, I believe, what enables you to overcome obstacles that might seem impossible. And so for us, surfing, as you mentioned, happened to be an activity that we were doing when we started the company. We are terrible at it, to be honest. Like we were discussing, I mean, you are way better surfer than, I don't know if any at Unbabel, but certainly me and the founders for sure. Like our instructors say, we're more like soul surfers, we're like.
That's what it matters, it's all the soul, right?
But it was about like having that time that you spend with people that that you work and creating memories and being able to have conversations beyond work, right? Because especially in the beginning, but still very much so, a startup is not exactly a company, just a company. There's more. It's more intense. There's more emotion. There's more risk. You need to believe in the mission and the people you're doing with. And I used to have this idea of paying off the emotional debt. Was something I used to talk about a lot. Where this idea that with any high emotional situation, you tend to accumulate emotional debt. So the example I used to think of is when you have your first kid as a couple, and suddenly, you have a lot of time to communicate before, and suddenly for a while, there's this being that requires all your attention, and you just focus on that, right? And so it's easy to stop communicating and to have those little things that you don't actually sort through. And then, come Christmas time, you're trying to decide which family you're going to spend Christmas with, and suddenly you're discussing when you didn't change a diaper, 4 months ago. And it was kind of that concept, right? Of like, how do we make sure that we have the time to work through the small things so that when the big decisions come, we're actually very aligned. And that's been a very important part of the culture of Unbabel. I think, and even before Unbabel, it's been something that I see as a recurring topic in my life, and the way I relate to people is life is short, and I think it's important to do things that are worth doing, solving hard problems. I am at my best when I'm building things, but I also very much enjoy, it's important the people I do it with, right? And so if you're doing something interesting with people that you hate or that you don't particularly care about, it's not going to work. You're going to. And so that's always been important. I think. So I did my undergrad in Lisbon, a degree that no longer exists. Actually, it's called Knowledge and Language Engineering, and it was in the School of Science and the School of Humanities, and it was Artificial Intelligence in Faculdade de Ciências and Computational Linguistics in Faculdade de Letras. And so it was innovative. It was actually a few of the technical professors plus a couple of professors of Faculdade de Ciências that had decided to create this natural language processing focused kind of degree. And so I did that, and then worked for a couple of years, and then went to the US and did my master's and PhD there.
When was this more or less?
So I graduated in '98, and then I went to the US in 2001. So yeah.
We were there more or less at the same time.
Yeah.
Studying different things, right? I was doing my MBA.
Oh, okay. When were you were at Harvard, right?
Yeah, 2000 to 2002.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So I went in 2001 thinking, so I went with a Fulbright scholarship, and it was supposed to be a 2-year thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to go for 2 years. And then that turned into 10 years and kids and company and life. Life happened, right, while you're making plans.
And then how did Unbabel came to be?
So Unbabel, so I was in the US for a while, started a company, then at some point moved to Portugal. And the idea was so in 2011, I moved to Portugal. I felt that I really wanted to come back. It was important for me to, I'd gone for a couple of years. Like I said, life had happened. I didn't want it to be random. I wanted to come back. The kids My oldest was 7 at the time. There was a number of things that were like, I need to go back to Portugal, spend a few years. And then if I go back to the US, it will be on purpose. And when I did, I met João, my co-founder and CTO. He had finished his PhD in machine translation. We had a common friend that introduced us. And we hit it off, like in many ways. So like common passion, common way of looking at things, very aligned on what we wanted to do. Even things like same anime TV shows that we liked, it's random stupid things, you know. But we started talking about doing things together. He had gotten this amazing Marie Curie grant as a professor. I said, don't do that. Come and join me doing a startup. So we worked together in a couple of companies, and then every time we kept talking about like applications of NLP, and we were seeing the field go and where were the opportunities. And then we start thinking about translation and how the evolution of machine translation and this idea of the hybrid model and the impact that we think it could have. And so in 2013, we decided to go for it, us and the rest of the founders. And initially it was just about like, let's get a prototype together. Does it even work? Can we even make this happen? And then we applied to Y Combinator, ended up getting in. It was like big roller coaster. Yeah, it was.
You're probably the first Portuguese company ever in Y Combinator, right?
Yes. Yeah, at the time.
And it was, you were there, and we were like, oh, there's a Portuguese company in Y Combinator. Let's invest.
Yes. Yeah, and it was right at the time that you guys invested still in Caixa Capital, and
that's right.
And it was. And I remember when we raised the round post YC was like 1.5 million, and we thought, that's it. We're never going to need to raise again. We're done. This is awesome.
How ridiculous does that sound now?
It's very much so. But we really thought it. We're like, you know, back at the Unbabel calculations, like, well, you know, in 2 years we're going to be processing 2 billion words, and so like, we're now at 3.5 billion. So
that's incredible. You still did capital.
And we still did capital, yes. Because it turns out 3.5 billion, it's still scratching the surface, right? Because it's such a huge problem. I think that's one interesting thing. I wonder how many other people that created really amazing things, you know, if you go Airbnb, Google, if they really understood the magnitude of the problem when they started. Because certainly I feel that we're able to much better describe it now. And we kind of knew that there was something important, but as you go and you start seeing, wait, but we're already here at 3.5 billion, and we're still in such small part of the market.
Just a little slither.
Right, and so you're like, wow, it means that the market is really huge. And you kind of rationally know it from the beginning. You know, you look at numbers like, oh, it's $25 billion market. But I don't think that you feel that, you really know that until you get to a point where that becomes, you know, more accessible. I mean, we're in Europe and the US, we have
and
very...
What kind of clients do you have? What are you addressing at this stage?
So maybe it's worth saying, what does Unbabel do? It's AI and language translation, right? So essentially, it's a very basic problem. So people speak different languages. That's never going to change. You know, we're fortunately communicating using a language that is a bit more international right now, but actually, surprisingly, only 25% of the world speaks English. Right? And so companies grow, and more they're expected to enter new markets. And when they do, they face this problem. My customers don't speak my language. So now I need to market and sell and provide customer support in an entire new language. I need to run my organization in a bunch of languages. And it's really, really painful right now to do it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why companies wait a long time to do it. When they do it in fewer languages than they could. It's a pain in the ass to manage, to scale. And so what we've done is we've started by creating a platform that combines a lot of different components of AI, so machine translation and a bunch of other things with human translation. So it's a much better, faster, much more scalable way to translate. And then we've built a platform on top of that that enables companies to tackle a lot of their language problems in a much easier way. So when we started, the first 3-4 years were really about building out the infrastructure and, you know, proving that this worked. Then for 3 or 4 years, we were really focused on customer service. So we thought, okay, let's start by enabling customer service agents to handle any language. And so we integrate into Salesforce and Zendesk and other CRMs. And if, you know, and still text, so email, chat. And if an agent is getting an email in Chinese, by the time they get it, it's in English. And when they reply, the user gets it in Chinese.
And all this in seconds.
Or, yeah, depending. So chat is instantaneous, you know, sub 1 second. And then email might take between, you know, a minute and 5 minutes. But for email, it's fine, right? And so, so we started proving this out. It really wasn't done until we started the idea of using translation to enable multilingual customer support. Now it's becoming, okay, people are seeing that the advantages are huge.
Has to be done, right?
Yes.
Someone has to do it,
Yes.
and you're doing it.
Yes.
What
And
kind
so,
of clients do you have that you can share?
we have clients in travel e-commerce, tech, the main verticals, gaming, fintech. We have clients from ranging from Booking to Microsoft to Logitech to Facebook to most of the most well-known brands at this point are using Unbabel. From a little pizza oven delivery Uni that are growing like crazy to SumUp to Zalando's and a bunch of other companies. Some of them are still, compared to the entire potential, they're still starting. They're starting to experiment with languages. They're starting to change their process. But now, since last year, we actually started to expand into other use cases. So customer service
acquisition, right?
Yes, exactly. So we acquired our first company in December, and that is rapidly enabling us to expand to all the use cases inside our organization. So beyond customer service, but marketing, sales, shared services in HR, it's quite exciting. The platform is evolving, it's maturing. We're starting to enable the platform to become self-service, so that's going to come soon. So we can actually start taking companies and helping them earlier and taking them through this journey where they are starting to deal with languages. It's a very exciting time for Unbabel. So we're now about 350 people. We have offices in 8 countries, or 8 offices. So we're in Lisbon. I know the whole world went remote. Our DNA is not remote, so we're never going to be remote first, truly. And I think it's starting to be time to define what you want to be, because you need people to self-select, right? And so we have a hybrid model. It's important for us to have physical spaces that people come together, that can get energy from the collaboration. And our hubs right now are Lisbon, London, Berlin, Edinburgh, Timișoara in Romania, Cebu in the Philippines, and then New York, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh.
That's quite a bit. It's quite a big ship. Tell me sort of some of the lessons learned over these last 10 years. So you were a very small company when we first invested. You're now a fairly large organization, medium-sized organization with a lot of complexity. We talked already about this concept of moving from a pirate ship into becoming a small navy, at least, or a medium-sized navy. What are the big lessons learned?
So there's a lot of them. There's a lot of lessons on, the things that you see after the fact. I think for me as a journey as a founder, even the journey from founder to CEO has been, I'm still very much in the learning phase, but I can see already a lot of the learnings that happen. So ever since Series A, I've been having coaching. I have I'm fortunate to be able to have access to great coaches, and that certainly speeds up. And one of the things that for me is maybe the hardest is this concept of top leveling. How do you start with a group of people, like most startups, that are really focused, dedicated, hardworking, young, typically without a lot of experience, right? And then you get, as you were mentioning, this idea of pirates to navy is, in the beginning, it's like, let's just figure this out, right? And people have a lot of initiative. And then you hit on something that kind of works, and you need to scale that, right? And the scalability requires process but it's also an art, right? If you put process too early, too fast, you're stifling innovation. If you wait too long, you're inviting chaos. And a lot of times you need to bring in people that have really done it, right? That are really experts in this area. And this is also hard because, as my coach says, founder CEOs tend to do this way too long, because there's a lot of loyalty with the people that
too late.
Yes, they wait too long to top level, right? Because obviously you have strong connection with the people that are doing this with you, and you believe in
that they can get there.
Yeah, we'll just grow together, right? But
at some stage you have to bring in.
If the companies around you, if the people around you, on average, are growing as fast as the company, it means the company is not growing fast enough, right? So typically, a successful high growth company will grow faster than the vast majority of people can grow with it, and that's fine, right? And I think you need to be really good at recognizing when someone is reaching the current peak. People, I think, grow in S curves. They go through something and then they grow really fast, and then they take a while to absorb that, and plateau for a while, and then absorb and immerse themselves into some problem before they get another growth spurt. Right? This idea of growth spurts, if they can, right? But even that S curve, sometimes you can't afford that, right? So you need to continuously be looking on, how do I bring the right leader to the right area? I mean, delegating is another very important aspect as a founder. Going from a founder to CEO, you need to stop micromanaging. You go from a time where you know all the aspects of your business to then having to have people that are essentially better than you. I mean, like all my leadership team, they're better at what they do than I am. You know, like it means that as a founder, you go through a phase where it's like, what's my role anymore? Like, what am I supposed to be doing if I'm not the expert in a particular thing, right? And then you realize that, yeah, I mean, like as a CEO, like setting the vision, hiring the people, inspiring, you know, sometimes making tough decisions on a small amount of data. Those are all very important things of being immersed in where you want to go. But then the execution of each area, you're most of the times a bottleneck. You're not the right person to dictate that.
How does it, you know, when you have such a strong culture and such a close proximity between people, how is it to take tough decisions?
One, it's not easy in general, and it's not easy because I'm not someone that thrives on confrontation. Some people really like it, right? Like they like to fight. I like to build, right? And so confrontation is something that requires me to mentally prepare for and drains me. And so what I noticed that inevitably I tend to like postpone tough decisions where I used to, and that was a learning process of like recognizing when I'm doing that and breaking that cycle. Now I have much better ways of dealing with it. I think one thing that it helped for us and for me, one is surround yourself with people that are really good at also demanding from you that you take the decision you need to take.
Complimenting you in a
like
sense.
For example, my chief of staff, you know, like that, creating that relationship where I know she is sometimes tough on me, but that's good because it forces you to recognize having a coach, all of that, you know, like forces you to be objective. Sometimes getting yourself out of the fray, you know, like taking some time to, because it's easy when you're very operational, you're just in the middle of it. If you step out sometimes, and that's one advantage of having different offices. Sometimes just by going to a different office, you kind of get yourself from the day to day and you see it a bit more holistically. But I think more importantly is the more you define the values. So what I notice is our biggest value is being mission driven. Right? And so, which means that camaraderie should not jeopardize the mission, right? So camaraderie is very important, but not at the cost of the mission. Ultimately, the most important thing is to get to where we need to get to. That's what we all signed up for, right? And so when I look from this perspective, then you can evaluate the decision you need to make on, hey, this is a goal, right? This is going to jeopardize where we need to go. Right. And we've done a lot of tough decisions in the past that weren't pleasant and that were really hard to do. But once you realize, okay, this is because, you know, this is what we need to do to execute on the mission, then, you know, it becomes easier to just execute. Right? And that's the other thing I noticed in terms of the actual mechanism of the decision. It's actually the hard part for me is the initial snowball. So it's like once you've stated that decision, then you know, and if I'm comfortable with the decision I'm making, just saying it out loud then makes it easier. Like some, you know, like there's always decisions, small and big, that not everybody agrees with, right? Yeah. So you need to be able to do that. You have to be able to have a disagree but commit attitude of the team, which fortunately we do. And then you need to be okay with the consequences.
For sure. Yeah. It's really interesting that you're talking about you know, coaching, because that's one thing that sometimes we find in sort of younger stage companies, that the founders are kind of afraid of doing coaching because they think that they might be questioned. But that's precisely the purpose of coaching, right? And so I think it's very brave that you've done that for many years and that you've incorporated that into your thought process.
And my current coaching practice is 10x CEO. So it's based in San Francisco. You have to be referred by your investors, and they only take typically companies Series B and above. So our company right now in my group is the smallest. So from 30 to 200 million of ARR, right? And you have a mix. So you not only have a coach that was the big difference, is a coach that actually was a CEO, was a CMO, that actually was an operator, he knows it, right? So he goes, so that was important, but also having a team of people that they're all CEOs in your group that are peers, right? And it's very interesting because, and it's a mix of founder CEOs and professional CEOs. And what I notice is it's one or two of them have multiple coaches, actually, not just one, but two, especially the $200 million company. They really rely on
perspectives.
To get to focus on different things, because the pressure to continue to grow a business that is at 200 million at 50, 100% a year, you need to continuously improve on yourself. You need to always be working on getting better.
For sure, for sure. A couple of last questions. You have lots of different investors, early stage investors and later stage investors. What are the lessons learned also in terms of the types of investors that you've had? What are the best practices or the things that you think people should know, particularly younger founders or that are in early stages, in terms of how to choose your VC?
The most important thing in my perspective is the actual person. So, I'm not naive to think that brand has no impact. Obviously there's funds everyone has heard about, Sequoias, etc. And they do provide benefit in terms of perception of customers. But in reality, the most important thing is not the fund, is the person, is the actual partner that you're going to be working with, especially if they're going to be part of your board. Because if you have a high functioning board, that is an incredible asset to the company. And if you have a dysfunctional board, it's an incredible deterrence, right? And it's an anchor. And I've seen, fortunately not at Unbabel, we've always had a great board, but I've seen many other companies where that isn't the case, and it's a mess, right? So that's number one advice is you're going to be working with this person for 4 or 5 years. So make sure it's someone you like, and someone that likes you, and someone that shares your beliefs, and someone that shares your vision. And the more that happens, the better, right? Because no company, or very rarely, companies are always up and to the right? So there's going to be ups and downs, and you need someone that understands that believes in what you're doing, and is not going to be looking to, change at the first sign, right? The other is that's something I've learned more recently. You need to provide leadership to your board. So in the absence of leadership, your board will take over, and typically one of the partners. Now, the vast majority of VCs that I've met, they're well-intentioned. They want the best for their deals. If they're investing, they want it to be good, right? And so ideally, they want a CEO that provides leadership and provides vision. And in a way, if they're seeing, hey, look, the ship is not being, like, no one's at the helm, someone needs to step in, then they will feel, that they have to, because that's their duty as board members and shareholders, right? So the managing of the board is something that maybe early on is less of a thing because it's a bit more informal, but as the company becomes bigger, you need to kind of to work on that part. And it's something that there's no school of how to manage your board, right? So you need to learn that. I think also early on, there's different kinds of VCs. There's VCs that have been operators, that have been founders, that have companies, there are others that haven't, they're more financial. They all can provide value, but it's important to have a bit of a mix, right? If you only have financial VCs, you're going to have a skewed view of what you should be going after, and your board is important to also challenge you as a CEO, right? I mean, it's very easy to become complacent, and this, I think, is particularly important for Portugal. So, even though conceptually and rationally we understand we live in a global society, it's very easy if you stay here to, the comfort breeds familiarity, and that breeds settling. It's important to be comfortable with discomfort and to look for opportunities to be uncomfortable in how much you're supposed to be growing and how much you're supposed to be doing. And I find that, it's not impossible at all to do from Portugal, but it's easy to, you're here, Portugal's a great place, the community is great, the weather is great, and it's easy to be like, oh, things are great, right? But you have to always think that you're competing at a global level, and, there's 5 other companies that are trying to do the same as you, working, you have to make sure you're the one that's working the hardest, because that will matter.
Yeah. And in Portugal, we've been very fortunate in a way not to have a local market, because it forces companies like yours to actually go global from day one, right?
Yes.
But now globally is difficult, and things are getting tough from an economic point of view. How are you preparing yourself, and what would you sort of recommend to other founders in terms of, the potentially tough times that we are starting to see presently and ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think long term, Paul Graham said the best way to have a great startup is to build a great business. So, I think it is sometimes easy to kind of get into the startup mode and say, like, forget that you're building something that should have real value to people in the world, right? Like, that should solve a problem that people are willing to pay, etc. And sometimes it's very needed to say, look, let's not worry about that right now. Let's worry about solving something, right? Social networks, network effect, etc. But we are in a phase right now where given the current economic climate, where there's more attention to, are you actually generating revenue? Are you profitable, right? And so I think, fortunately, our last raise was pre-COVID, so we were in a way lucky that we didn't raise at ridiculous valuations during COVID, so we don't have that issue. Some startups that did are going to face that as an issue, and also even, for example, our acquisition. So acquiring an LSPs are profitable companies, right? So we're actually fairly close to being profitable. We have a very reasonable and achievable path to being profitable, and so that is it's a good moment right now. It's really good to be that. We also have a very ambitious and strong strategy for inorganic and organic growth that we believe we can execute. But ultimately, like the only thing you can do is build something that people want, right? And to do that in a way that is economically viable. I think you're seeing a lot of companies starting to think about reducing workforce or doing it. That's not our case right now. We don't have plans for that. I think obviously you have to be extra careful on hiring and making sure that you're hiring people that can provide immediate value. But I also feel that even the downturns, everything has been accelerating in the world, right? And so information spreads so much faster, for news about anything. And the way that markets react on aggregate seems to be faster than before. Yeah. So I think even though sometimes there's some downside to that, which is a sharp turn on the negative that happens super quick.
But could be the upturn could be super quick.
But I think the upturn is going to be quicker as well. So
let's hope so.
Let's see what happens at the end of the summer.
Okay. Vasco, great to see you.
Likewise.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Stefan.
And hope to keep on supporting you.
Anytime, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.